So everybody was okay with the pizza and ice cream party we just finished? Okay, all right, good. We'll do that again when people travel. Anyway, yesterday we talked about all those expeditions. I'm going to try to blast through this. Eventually what wound up happening was people decided it didn't make a ton of sense, especially if you're just going to study like coastal ecosystems. Doesn't make sense to have these big ships outfitted with corridors and crew to go and collect that data. So instead of maybe hopping on a boat in England and then sailing all the way down to the, let's say, a coast along the African coast to study animals there, what's better than having to commute from England to the coast of Africa over and over and over? So maybe just commute once and then you set up all of your research stuff there, right? Like that would be feasible. Remind me about commuting and costs, because I have a fun fact that I learned on NPR yesterday. But eventually what wound up happening was not only were we collecting data on ships, but it started to make sense for the formation of marine labs. And these were coastal labs and research facilities that were committed entirely to studying coastal ecosystems in specific areas, which makes sense, right? Don't have a boat when you can have this. The other part of this that was a huge shift in the understanding of marine science is if I'm on a boat and let's say I catch I want to study whale and I get a whale, I'm probably going to kill that whale if I'm going to take it and study its physiology. Like it or not, it's going to happen. If I have a coastal lab and I happen to be centered where maybe whales return year after year after year, I don't have to kill whales anymore. And instead of just studying their physiology, we can actually start to study how they live in the environment in that particular point in time. So by doing this, we transition from just having that sort of like let's kill it and see how it works to let's not kill it and see how it lives instead of just how it functions. So the main shift that we see here, simply put, is going from pure physiology, which would be just the operation of an animal, to looking at rather the ecology and how it lives and interacts within its environment. So huge shift in the way that we viewed marine science just by putting buildings along the coast in a very specific location. Now, among some of the first big labs that showed up, and we're going to just talk about two specific ones in this country, have you guys ever been on tours of boats as they dock here in town? Which boats? So you said your dad works with boats. What sort of boats?
The fishing boats.
Okay, so you've been on tours of plenty of fishing boats, I assume. Okay, are there other vessels that come through rather than just the fishing vessels?
Ferry.
Okay, so the ferry, is it passenger vessel? Is that what it's classified as? Okay, we also get Coast Guard ships, right? So maybe we have military. The Navy came through last year, which was pretty cool. But from time to time, more specific, we have NOAA ships that come in and out of town all the time. You can spot them easily because they have the big fancy scientific equipment to do weather monitoring and things like that on them. Last year, fortunately for us, the Sikuliaq, which is an ice-breaking research vessel funded by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and what is one of these first big marine biolabs in our country, Woods Hole Biological Lab. They were sailing up through the Arctic. Their intent last year was to go through the Northwest Passage and study marine life on the way through. Something happened with their ship, I don't recall, but they wound up getting waylaid and had to dock here for a couple days. And the fisheries class, bless you, actually got to go and tour the Sikuliaq, which was awesome. Keep your eyes and ears open. If you hear of any research vessel through any of your parents, you see one docking, and I'm unaware of it, don't hesitate. Even if you think I might know about it, let me know. I'll reach out to the vessel, and I'll try to get us on as many research vessels and boats as possible throughout the year. Okay, so these marine labs, just so that you know them, because I know that at least one person in here is considering environmental science and maybe even oceanographic research, is we have Woods Hole is one of the large and first marine labs established in our country. Woods Hole is founded in the late 1800s. It's the Woods Hole Marine Biolab, and it is one of the most prestigious labs that one can work at in the field of marine sciences, even still to this day. The Woods Hole Marine Biolab, and it's in Woods Hole and Massachusetts, MA, if you ever wanted to visit. I've never been to the East Coast, but I mean, I'm sure it's cool. It's a big fancy lab, I guarantee it. Okay, beyond that, there's also marine labs that you may wind up visiting, especially there's a lot of people here that come and go to and from California. There's a ton of marine labs that you will find along the coast of California from Monterey Bay all the way down south. One of the largest that we have in California is the Scripps Institute. And if we ever wind up having to do research, or I make you do research rather, is probably the way to word that, on maybe a career in marine bio or some related field, the Scripps Institute would be a good place to start looking at that. It's an institute of oceanography. And you would find this in, I don't know how to pronounce the name of the city. I assume that it's La Jolla. Anybody live in California or heard of La Jolla? Okay, so that's a total guess. La Jolla, California. Southern California is where you'd find this. Okay. Now, beyond that, we had the advent of marine labs, and even still, while these places were founded in the early 1900s, technology to get better ideas of what was going on underneath the sea didn't really exist at that point. Anybody here ever snorkeled? Probably, I assume. If you're snorkeling, how long can you go underwater? You personally, not like the best in the world. Like 30 seconds to a minute, maybe. It depends on how long you hold your breath. Anybody ever spent more time than that underwater? How? Like, might hold your breath. Any other fancy devices that people use nowadays? Diving gear. Scuba diving, back in the day, it was those big crazy suits with the lead, with the hoses that went up, but you were limited due to air pressure, and the deeper you go to deal with that pressure, you actually start to need special concentrations of oxygen that maybe you don't get at the surface. So, how long have people been modern scuba diving? When do you think that showed up? That they could go in with, like, completely themselves without just having a hose run up to the surface. How long has that been around? 17? 70. So you're pretty close, actually. Is post-World War II. So, as is always the case, in times of war or with real emphasis on the military, new technologies are developed initially with, military applications, but they inevitably make their way into the public and help us to inform many different things from science, probably mostly science, realistically. But as we're looking at it, so World War II happened. We're not going to go into any details about it. It did happen. But out of World War II, as a result of the need for new technologies, especially since we were fighting in the Pacific theater and, being able to operate in the water became an important idea. World War II technologies that wound up impacting this, huge. First off, if you wanted to see the ocean floor, can you? Do you ever have the option to see the ocean floor? I would say kind of. Could we all walk about 100 yards that way and take a look at the ocean floor right there? Yeah, I think it's underwater, right? It's the floor of the ocean. It's right there. Now, unfortunately, we can't go super duper deep, right? Even diving, you're limited. Nowadays, still, you cannot go to the deepest depths. So out of this, it made sense that in a World War II or any wartime situation, you need to be able to see what's underneath, right? So if there's big mines that are floating down there that you don't want your ships to hit, you need to be able to find them. Scuba gear didn't exist yet. So a new technology was developed. We started using, as a humankind, sound navigation and ranging. Now, my gut feeling is that you guys probably have not heard of, unless you took earth science or remember Mr. Gregory mentioning it randomly, sound navigation and ranging. Anybody know what I'm talking about there? Holy sonar. As you look at this, the acronym was made to fit sound, navigation, and ranging. We had sonar showing up. Now, we maybe have everybody seen or heard of sonar? What is it? Other than sound, navigation, and ranging. Like, how does that technology, we're not going to go into the physics of it, but at its most basic, what is sonar? Sound, what about it?
Sound map.
Yeah, it's a sound map. Bats fly around in the dark, right? How do bats know where they're going? They use echolocation. They shoot out sound, they click, the sound bounces off stuff and it comes back, right? Like, that's how bats navigate the world. In the ocean, until this time, we thought that the ocean was kind of quiet. Like, we didn't know how absolutely insanely loud the ocean was, but it turns out that you can take sound and at the right frequency, you just blast it through the water it will hit whatever's in the water, it'll bounce back up, and you can detect it, and you now have a decent way to get a feeling and a look at what's going on beneath you. Sonar, dangerous or not? It can be. Really intense sonar, it can kill animals. Like, it does kill animals. Animals will wash up. If scuba divers get caught up in sonar like humans, even without the high, like full power sonar, people come up with blown eardrums and stuff just from the intensity of that sound. Because they have to be so loud because the ocean is so much louder than anybody thought. Okay, beyond that, we not only got sonar, which was a new way to start thinking about maybe mapping what the ocean floor might look like, but we also got a way to stay submerged for long amounts of time. Developed through World War II technology, we're self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. Now, if you haven't started writing, you are cool to hold off because there might be a shorter way to say this. Underwater breathing apparatus. That is fancy talk. For what? Scuba. Self-contained. It was just a tank on your back and a mask. That's all you needed. Contained everywhere with you. To go underwater, to help you breathe. The apparatus that you used, that whole process, this is scuba. Now, scuba has kept advancing as time has gone by. Anybody in here ever watched Dragon Ball Z when they were younger? Cool. Awesome. If you haven't, I don't know why I remember it. There's a specific scene where I saw Goku, and this is like, I remember this from my childhood. He had a simple mask, and off of it came a canister. And I thought, that's the coolest possible way to scuba dive. But it was fake, right? It was a cartoon. Until this year, I've started seeing companies that sell whole face masks that just have a simple canister that you can now scuba dive for 10 or 15 minutes. Just go up to the surface, pump it back up, and go back down. It's awesome. Maybe. I haven't tried it. Okay. Anyway, those were all results of World War II, and all of a sudden, once we have like reliable scuba and sonar, we can start making more and more sense out of the ocean underneath the sea, right? We can see it. We can physically go down and check it out. Okay. I'm going to make you guys read something. And I'm well aware that we don't have quite enough textbooks for everybody. So what I would like you guys to do is I want groups of 2 or 3 at a time. We're going to read a short passage with your neighbor quietly, probably out loud, but I would say just make sure you read it together. If you want a group of 4 or 3, like I'm fine with it. Let's get our group set up though, and then I need to take a picture of you guys physically reading the books that I bought with my grant money. Yes, how much money you got in your pocket? Go ahead. Yeah, hustle. Don't take your phone, okay? Okay, so I'm not going to say you guys have to popcorn read. I would rather you don't just read silently. Pick whoever's most comfortable to read and ask them to read a paragraph quietly to your small group.
I don't have a book for podcasts.
There's a lot of people that don't. We're going to have to share for now because we're waiting on a few more. Okay, so the actual history of sailing the oceans, like maybe it is, maybe it isn't your thing, but the increase in technology is an important thing to understand, just like what technology that we go through in the ocean. I'm not going to tell you every single different new technology that exists because realistically it winds up being just a bunch of fancy acronyms for very specific vessels that are doing very specific things. So with that in mind, what I want you guys to read through together, and I would say switch by paragraph, but I want everybody to make sure you read it and answer a few questions for me. We can talk about the questions out loud, just like as a group, unless it seems like people aren't answering, in which case I'll just make it like a real write it down on paper assignment, but I'd like to avoid that. Okay, I want you guys to go to page 12 in your text. And in page 12, you're going to see that I think it's in blue in your textbook, observing the ocean, right? In like teal on top, and then it's very clearly a picture of some technology that's going to exist. Okay, in your small groups, I want you to read through what's on page 12 and 13, and there are 3 follow-up questions that I'm cool to address as a class, but it's going to get kind of loud and chaotic in here if you need to move next to somebody, so it's not super loud. Some of you are going to have to read together. Like, I get it. It's going to happen. Let's give us like 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to take pictures of you guys reading. Cool. All right. So I'll give you a few minutes. I want you to organize it as follows. Not to scale. My bet is you can finish it before you leave, but I will post these questions on the Google Classroom so that you don't have to take a book home. Okay. Your paper likely has margins. Okay. So check it out. There's a margin there, and here's a margin on the side of your page. Okay. What I want you to do is on the top left, I want you to write your name. So don't write exactly what I'm writing on the board. Make it your own. My name is Kyle Holloway. I want to make sure that legibly you have written whose paper it is that I'm looking at to make sure that I assign the grade to you. Okay, for this, we're in fisheries. I'm okay if we just call it fish. And then we're going to go ahead and say that, hey, these questions are covering 1.1, which is Chapter 1, Section 1. You will be answering 3 short questions for me. You will find them on page 17. And you get the privilege of questions 1 through 3. Okay. I am not your literature teacher, nor am I your composition or English teacher. I don't want paragraphs of answers for something that could be answered with a 6 or 7 word sentence. Okay? Please don't write like a caveman or cavewoman, but be as short and to the point as possible. I am not judging how beautifully you can craft answers. I only want to know that you show me that you know what it's asking. Okay, 5 minutes. My guess is you can probably finish it before you leave.